When stuff gets hacked, there's a lot of focus, rightfully, on the exploit. How did it happen? Which smart contract had a vulnerability? How does it get fixed? The exploit, though, is just a small part of the story. By and large, attackers don't want a degen with a massive bag of tokens. They want something more useful. No offense to the crypto heads. That means they need to cash out. But you can't just roll up to a centralized exchange and click a few buttons. They'll ask too many questions, and will freeze your funds before they give you the cash. So what's a hacker to do? In this episode, we return to the ByBit hack, still the largest on the books. The attacker wants to exchange and move their crypto in a way that's difficult for observers to trace. That's not a simple task on a public ledger. So what do they reach for? Let's find out. This is Not Your Crypto Podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Not Your Crypto Podcast. I make it episode 26 with myself, Justin, and my partner in crime, Michael.
Hello, hello.
So, Michael, what have you been reading of late? What's been keeping you or your interests spiked?
Yeah, I'm glad we're going back to the what have you been reading, I think, though it is kind of hard to... Sometimes I don't read a lot. But have you seen this Frack article? You've seen this Frack article because I sent it to you.
Yes,
But,
I did get a chance to briefly skim it in between tears of laughter. But I think you should let everyone in on the joke and give everyone a brief overview of what went on.
Frack is still going. Frack,
Yep.
Phrack, which I probably might have known in the back of my mind, but I'm always pleased to be reminded of that fact. It's 40 years plus or something.
I think so. It's an absolute institution. For those who aren't in the security field and just like listening to us because you're interested tangentially, Frack is a cypherpunk magazine. I think
Very
it's
old school hacker
very
magazine.
old school. We're talking they publish only in text files. You can go online.
Still
Everything's
free.
uploading
text files. It's
still
fantastic.
uploading
Really good stuff.
.txts. It's a fantastic resource for extremely technical articles, and you actually get to see the evolution of the tech industry as well, because you'll see them from everything from freaking phones and phone lines to getting free access to the internet over your coaxial or your cable modem, all the way through to, well, this one.
Yeah, so this article, I think I saw it. I probably saw it on Twitter. That's where I see most stuff a lot of the time. But this article is called APT Down. I think it's APT Down, the North Korea files. Basically, there's two kind of things about this article that are interesting. One is the actual content of the article, which is these Frack reporters, journalists, got access to a bunch of, what would you call them? Dumps, I guess.
Yeah.
Disclosures of information, of tooling, of files, of documents, of code, and all that from one of the North Korean APT groups.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were able to see how they worked, including things like, reporting that they do to their managers and whatever, and as well as on the technical side, the kind of backdoors they were using, what kind of access they had, initial access, this kind of stuff. So, okay, that's interesting. The other part of the article, which is interesting, is there's this timeline at the beginning of it, which I think is what caught a lot of attention in the media that was around it.
Mm-hmm.
A timeline of them working on this story and reporting on this article. And the timeline is basically they got this information and then they disclosed it or attempted to disclose it to a bunch of South Korean agencies, because obviously one of the main targets of North Korean APT groups is South Korean government agencies.
I was going to say, that's a bit presumptuous for you to say, obviously the main target, because the world is their target.
Yeah, that's not
true.
Yeah. But anyway, I think some of the stuff that they found, was particularly, it was disclosed information about hacking into South Korean stuff. So they disclosed it. I think they got maybe some initial responses back, but not a ton of responses back from their disclosures. Then they get this weird signal message afterwards, which uses a pseudonym or something that they had only ever used in their previous disclosure to the agencies, and tells them not to trust Signal or Proton or something. Anyway, I'm messing with the timeline a little bit.
Yeah,
they get this weird signal message, and after they tried to disclose and kind of got not a ton of information back.
Yeah, and just for our listeners who, again, That is not a typical way to communicate with an official government agency, even one that
No.
works in security. Normally, you'll go over official channels, or normally there'll be a government mandated channel to use a third party platform and be like, hey, don't trust the other third party platform.
Yeah, so that was
It's
a bit
kind of a
weird.
bit deep throat, so to speak.
And then the next thing that happens is so they use Proton Mail email service to make their disclosures and communicate with the government agencies. Their Proton Mail account gets shut down, kind of without warning.
And
Which,
again, more context, they used to use Proton email to communicate with other disclosures that they've done before as well. They weren't. It wasn't like they spun up a brand new email account for. Well, they may have spun up a brand new email account, but they've never had.
I'm not sure of that part.
Yeah, so that was suspect.
Yeah, so that was kind of weird. That also, when that happened, that also caught a lot of interest in the security media, Twitter, whatever, independent kind of space, because shutting supposed to be one of the use cases for Proton Mail is for whistleblowing and disclosing and whatever kind of stuff. So that was caused a bit of a stir, I guess. But anyway, it keeps getting weirder. Like those aren't the only weird things. It keeps getting weirder because then a investigation does start from the South Korean government, kind of trying to look into this, or look into things around this whole area of North Korean infiltration into their agencies. And they announced that one day they announced they're going to inspect a government data center. They're going to send people to go inspect it, see what's going on there, I guess. And then I think it's literally the day after, which is the day the inspection is supposed to start. They're like, tomorrow they're going to go inspect this place. So then literally the day after, that data center burns down, like physically burns down.
Again, for people following the thread, why are they going to? Why the data center? Why are they inspecting? Long story short, what they identified through this dump was that this Korean APT, Advanced Persistent Threat, i.e., a third party or second party government contractor on behalf of a nefarious government such as the North Korean one or an adversarial government, they are launching their attacks from what they can see via the network trace, essentially, from these, I think it's two or three, or maybe
I think there were multiple ones. Yeah.
There are multiple data centers in South Korea. Now, this is interesting because this is something that we're starting to see in security a lot. I've also heard rumors of it anecdotally happening in the region that I live in, which is the UAE as well, which is bad actors that are well funded are basically spinning up their own data centers instead of having to hack others. That way, when rubber meets the road in terms of law enforcement, you actually have control over the physical servers as well, so then you can just decommission them as and when you're ready. This was a bit of a violent decommissioning, wouldn't you say? They effective, and it's also quite interesting that the South Korean government decided to make these inspections a surprise with literally 24 hours notice. I think they announced it like after the working day as well. I think they said it was like after 5:30 when everyone's gone home. Oh, we're coming to investigate data centers tomorrow. Then I think some network admins got told you need to go back into the office. And I'm going to need you to set some, I don't know. It's interesting. They literally burnt down the data center. And that's why I'm giggling like a school child, because I've never heard of such drastic action.
Yeah, I think it's been, the story is that there was some like battery replacement going on and the batteries caught fire and then the whole thing caught fire or something. Anyway, but it's just like a wacky timeline of events.
Wacky timeline.
Yeah, I don't know. Check it out, I guess.
I think anyone who's even slightly, we'll keep it in the show, we'll put it in the show notes, but anyone who's even got a slight interest in random security stories, and this is as random as they get, take it from two very well seasoned security professionals who have read some random ones. This is the burning down of data centers is definitely an extreme one, and it was very specific and clearly very targeted. On that note, we're sticking with the Korean Peninsula because we are going to do a recap of a hack that we discussed earlier this year in episode 17 and 18. It was still to this date is the largest hack this year. And that is the hack of the centralized exchange ByBit. We discussed it in great detail. The technical detail around it was actually fascinating in terms of what they did, where they basically hacked a contract. They hacked a contract via a wallet, if I remember correctly, and they did all types of shenanigans where basically transactions were signed. They would undermine the process to make sure that a lot of money was able to go out the door, and it was actually authorized by senior officials. I think the CEO was actually involved in signing the transaction to go out the
Yeah,
door.
one of them. Yeah.
And at this entire attack basically totaled 1.4 billion going out the door from ByBit, and it resulted in the industry trying banding together actually to make sure the bottom didn't fall out of the crypto market. And they did well. They succeeded in that. They were able to identify the funds, but then they also attributed. They were able to get round to the point of attribution and say this was a gain. North Korean APT, a famous one known as Lazarus. Lazarus has been around. I don't know how long Lazarus has been around. Lazarus has been known to me for at least, I'm going to say, since the Sony hack, which I think is about 2008, 7 or 9. I can't remember. Don't quote me on that, but at least 15, 16 odd years. It's been around a while, and they got into crypto in a big way because obviously data is one thing to monetize. It's a whole other thing when you've got tokens that have real world asset value to monetize as well. So they basically pivoted into crypto, and they've become very big crypto hackers ever since. So this episode, we're going to talk about the day after the money goes out the door. What do you do and we do it from the attacker's perspective. You now have $1.4 billion. If you've watched any heist movie like we had in the UK, we had a very big heist when I was very young where someone stole a lot of gold. And no, was it gold or was it cash? I think it was cash. And they stole so much, the biggest problem they had was moving that cash out of the UK, because the UK is an island and all the ports and everything got shut down in terms of being able to move freight. The same thing happens in crypto, ironically enough, even though it's only a digital equivalent, a digital representation of an asset. You now have $1.4 billion that everyone saw, because obviously blockchains are public, go out the door. What do you do next? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about in this episode. Michael, tell me, what do you do with 1.4 billion?
Well, I think one place to start is like that's kind of an important simplification, saying what they have, right? So saying, the hack happens, the attacker has $1.4 billion is kind of not the ground truth. And that not being the ground truth is kind of a problem for the attacker. Because what they have is X amount of token that is valued, if you go to an exchange, might be valued at 1.4 billion US dollars or something. But what they actually have is a bunch of crypto tokens on a blockchain. And that's not what they want to have, typically. Typically, what they want to have is the monetary value of that. So, yeah, to an attacker, like holding a crypto token is generally not valuable. They don't want to like degen with it or whatever. Like they don't want to like yield farm on that.
What do you mean? I can't go and stake this.
Though maybe they should. Like it probably would have been, would have worked out for them. But they want to transfer it to something that's more useful to them. And usually what's most useful to them is like hard currency, like USD or, something like that. So to do that, they need to move the tokens through this like patchwork of systems that makes up crypto to get it from being the token to being the whatever they want to turn it into. And like that's not something like before, I started kind of learning about this space. That wasn't something I really understood what that involved. But if you've ever tried to like on-ramp or off-ramp into or from crypto, then you kind of start to understand what some of these friction points are.
I'm going to pause you there. That's first jargon alert. So that seems to just be my job. On-ramp or off-ramp, try and buy crypto to do things in the cryptoverse. If on-ramping, if you've ever tried to buy Bitcoin, if you've ever gone onto Coinbase and said, I'm going to buy this token, you're on-ramping into crypto. It's as simple as that. It's taking your fiat currency and replacing it with a token, and that's of the equivalent value. Carry on.
So yeah, totally. So they need to, like what the attacker needs to do next is they need to, they have all these tokens in this wallet. Often it's just one wallet, at least at the very start. And they need to make a series of transactions, on the blockchain that moves that crypto to places where they can then exchange it, where they can take it from one blockchain to another in order to exchange it or whatever. So their job isn't done. Like when the point here, and this is something we've talked about in our other episodes a lot of the time, is like you move into act 2, right? The like post exploitation, like after the crypto hits the attacker wallet, you're now in a different game, and it's still an important game. It's still part of the overall security story of what happens.
100%. So effectively what you've done, as you said, is you've got this ground truth. You've got all these assets that are valued at this money, and you need to get access to the actual money. Um, Now, one other point I'd like to say here is
Mhm.
you're also, not only are you trying to effectively off-ramp this money, but you stole this money. So you're trying to obfuscate where you
Yes,
got this money as well.
100%.
Because 100, because if you're off ramping into this money, you're effectively you're signaling that you want to engage with the legal financial system at some point. And the legal financial system obviously has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years and has safeguards around stolen goods and assets. And they will start to ask you, if you've got a lot of money, where this money's come from. Fun fact, I used to work for a very established design house in the UK, and at their tills, if you went over, I don't know if this is still the case now, as they're like 8 years ago now,
Mm.
if you went to their till and bought more than £10,000 worth of goods, the moment you went over 999.99, they did a KYC check on you, which was actually fascinating to see. And it's the same thing. You have that at retail, you're going to have it in large institutions, etc., etc. So
Yeah.
not only have they got it off ramp, they've also got to hide where they took it from, and that's what leads us down this rabbit hole. So let's go on
Yeah.
to the
So
second act.
yeah, I would say there's like two main problems they have, right? One is, one is that if you move your tokens, there's certain places where if you move your tokens into, you're going to have trouble doing what you want to do. And that's what you're talking about. Like if I just take all these tokens and I move them into a centralized exchange and then try to exchange them for currency, I'm going to move the tokens into the centralized exchange. The exchange is going to say, who are you? What's who are you? Where's this money coming from? Or, they might even just have my wallet address on a list that's like, don't exchange this because it was hacked.
Wallet,
yeah, it's like a sanction. Yeah, it's effectively a sanction list. And that's going to be a problem for me because then my crypto is going to get frozen there and then I can't use it.
Mhm.
So they're like throughout the crypto ecosystem, there are these kind of like choke points where in order to do what I want to do, I need to kind of give some element of control of my tokens to another party or subject it to control of another party. And at those points, that other party could step in and stop what I want to do. Centralized exchanges are kind of the prime example of that you might think of, but there's others that we'll discuss.
Okay.
And an example of that is what we saw in the SUI, in the CETUS incident, I should say, where the choke point was actually like the ecosystem itself, like the set of validators in the ecosystem deciding to freeze things.
Yeah.
Okay. The other problem the attacker has is often liquidity.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to make transactions, especially if I'm like bridging from one chain to another, I can't just do that with all of the tokens that I may have stolen, especially if I've stolen an extremely large number of them.
Yeah.
Because these exchanges, and this is, if you kind of followed all the DeFi stuff we talked about also in the CETUS episodes.
Yeah, so
these exchanges,
that's episodes 21, 22, and 23.
There we go. In order for those exchanges to happen, there needs to be like liquidity that lets me exchange one thing for another. And that liquidity is not endless. It has limits.
Yeah.
And so I might bump up against those limits and need to navigate that problem as well.
Not even might, you definitely will bump.
You definitely will.
Not only do they have liquidities, they also have times as well where they're like only a certain amount can be transferred for a certain amount of time. So bridging is literally just, as Michael said, you move your one asset, you exchange one asset for another because you're trying to move between different chains. But there are other ways you can do that as well. But yeah, they need to have, it's like, imagine it's just a financial institution and they only have so much money on hand, because it's all going to work. And so if you rock up with 1.4 billion worth dollars of assets, depending on the size of these centralized exchanges, it's directly correlated to how legitimate they are and how many questions they're going to ask, right? Because
yes, but that's also the liquidity is also a problem on the decentralized side as well. If I'm using a decentralized exchange or a decentralized bridge, which we'll talk about kind of what was used specifically here, they are also liquidity constrained.
Yep.
Based on liquidity providers, similar to what we talked about in CETUS again. Yeah. So, so there's this like almost like a cat and mouse game where the attacker is maneuvering their funds, working with these constraints, trying to avoid choke points and trying to manage liquidity constraints. while the hacked entity, I guess, or the victim, is trying to recover these funds, particularly by interacting with these choke points to say, hey, if you see this, can you freeze it? Can you return it? This is what's going on. That's kind of the meta structure of Act 2 of what happens. So we can talk specifically about ByBit then, because they took, I would say, a interesting approach to it. Or I don't know, one that is useful for us as people.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good template because I'm not sure it was done this way before either. So I think it was. I may have set a precedent for the industry.
Yeah, that's a good question. But yeah, so basically, ByBit immediately after the hack, they opened this website called LazarusBounty.com.
Yep.
You can check it out, I guess. And it's a site where you could submit tips, basically, or information to help identify and freeze funds that were moving as a result of the Lazarus activity. And then if you helped freeze, if your tip led to them being able to freeze funds somewhere, you would get a bounty payment, or like a reward, basically from the proceeds.
And these tips are needed because when you think about it logically, how do you discern one wallet from another? There's lots of whale wallets out there. How do you know which one has been funded by stolen proceeds? So you're going to need the community to come in and say, well, I kind of know where that came from because I just do. Give me some money. That's kind of what happens here. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like, this is part of kind of that like open source approach almost to security, right? Like almost all of this activity will be on the blockchain. It'll be in transactions. It'll be at least partially traceable. And so individual community members, individual people are able to just do this, right? It's not like you need to be able to see bank statements, need to be able to see wires happening or whatever. You see transactions happening on the blockchain. Those are generally open. So, but yeah, so if you check out the website, which I think is kind of interesting to do, a side effect of this is that there's like a lot of actual data on the website about how the laundering activity took place, about what Lazarus did with the funds from the hack. And specifically about like what amounts they attempted to move either successfully or unsuccessfully through different systems in order to get to their goal. And so, we can look at that and kind of see what it says and kind of understand like how this money movement happens and how the response happens. When I looked at it, at least, and kind of tried to understand what was going on here, there were like two main categories of systems that they interacted with and that they interact with to do what they wanted to do, to maneuver this money. First category are things called mixers, which is like when we describe it, it's gonna be like very classic money laundering kind of thing. The second category are bridges, which we've talked about in previous episodes, and we kind of gave a little description up here, but basically a way for me to take crypto that's on one chain, on one blockchain, and move that token or value to another blockchain.
Effectively, if you want to TradFi analogy for that, is basically your FX clearinghouse, effectively. I'm changing Canadian dollars into US dollars or into Great British pounds or into euros, etc. That's what a bridge is. Just FYI, the industry is not a fan of bridges. They're the solution that they've got for now because bridges keep getting hacked. And I think we've covered 2 bridge hacks or maybe 1 bridge hack. I can't remember. Bridges keep getting hacked because they're literally just FX clearinghouse, both sitting on 2 chains, 2 points of access, so to speak, with obviously many more in real life, just tying up assets, and therefore they become a honeypot for Lazarus-like groups. And as Michael also said, mixers have been around for a while. Is Tornado Cash considered a mixer?
I would consider it a mixer.
And that's the most famous one because that was an open source project where the main contributor got taken to court, still is in court. Yes, no,
yes.
No.
We'll talk about. We'll get to Tornado Cash. It was not the most used in this one, but we will.
It was one of those used, and then also, just to recap over Michael's point as well. Again, the symmetry of this is different to Web 2, in my opinion. Soapbox time, because yes, all that data is on the chain. it's on the chain for the attackers, and it's also on the chain for the sleuths and the people who are trying to recoup the money. So the attackers now know what game they've got to play, which is, okay, they have access to all this data. Well, let's flood them with a lot of data. And so you start to see, as Michael and I are about to go through the steps of what they did, the first thing I think Michael's going to go on to now is the splitting up of the cash. Is if you basically, it's about raising the cost of how much investigation you need to do and basically not swallow up, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, where you take up so much time that by the time you figure out what I've done, I've already done it. Barn door, horse and bolted, basically. That's what the game becomes. You'll see it evolve into that as we go through the steps. But yeah, let's get into your first one, which I think is going to be mixers, right?
Yeah. So like you said, like the very first thing they do is split the funds. Like it's all in one wallet. I think it was all in one wallet to start. And basically they fracture that into, I don't know, hundreds to thousands, probably. I don't know the exact number.
On the Lazarus Bounty website, you can see it. There are so many wallets, and they split them amongst different chains as well.
Lots of different wallets and lots of different addresses. And then take different pieces of that and then start moving them through different systems. And so we talked about mixers and bridges. So mixers are systems that exist on the blockchain, or processes that exist on the blockchain, and their goal is to break the attribution between like the input of a transaction and the output of a transaction.
Yeah.
So if I'm on the blockchain, I make a transaction, I send 10 Bitcoin, which is a ton of money, I guess nowadays, from wallet A to wallet B. You can just look at the blockchain and say, okay, wallet B received 10 Bitcoin from wallet A. And then if I then roll up to an exchange, okay, the very strong link between wallet B and wallet A, I can freeze the funds from wallet B.
Yeah.
So the goal of a mixer is to make transactions that break that attribution.
Yep.
And typically the way that you do that is by mixing multiple transactions together in a way that if you look at some activity that happened, you can't say wallet A definitely sent this amount to wallet B. And these systems have been on the blockchain like pretty much since the start of Bitcoin, really.
Yep.
Because, their stated thing usually is to be like privacy preserving systems, right? So it's always, it's been known that blockchains are not private systems, really. Information about the transactions is on them, and full information about the transactions is on them. So if you want them to be private systems, what do you do?
Okay, so
that depends on the chain, but
yeah, it depends on the chain. But that's quite a powerful statement. So they're not private, but so this is where we get into the philosophical debate, right? They're not private, but you need pseudonym. They do enforce pseudonymity. So does that not make them private in your mind?
I don't know that I would say they enforce. I don't know what it would mean to enforce pseudonymity, I guess.
Because
they are, they are pseudonymous in that, like, my name isn't on.
Right.
Like my identifier on the blockchain is something that is not natively tied to myself.
Right.
But then I think I mean, the practical thing, one of the practical discussion things in all of crypto right now is like the role of KYC and how that does tie identities to wallet addresses.
Because it has to at some point.
Which is the point, which is kind of the, regulatory point of it.
Yeah. So transactions are not private, but identities are in some way.
Can be.
I guess that's more a nuanced way. It can be. All right, cool. Sorry to break your train of thought there,
that's
but
okay.
You just
that's
said that
fine.
statement where you're like, actually, blockchains are not private. And I'm like, But yes. Okay, cool. So now you've got this thing where you've got this process. I think one of the old ones is called CoinJoin, which, I mean, cool alliteration. But basically, yes, as you said, they commingle all of these funds going into one source, and then they get paid out in certain amounts. So it's not deterministic who sent what. All you can see is all this stuff went in, all this money, all these assets went in, and then they got distributed amongst these other wallets. You cannot see which wallet went to what. That's a correct summary,
basically,
right?
like CoinJoin is like almost like a primitive, you might say, I guess, in the Bitcoin.
Oh wait, sorry,
this is in Bitcoin specifically.
Oh,
basically, when I make a transaction, like you think of a transaction as wallet A makes a transaction to wallet B, wallet A signs the transaction. That's what validates it.
Yeah.
CoinJoin, what it allows you to do is like natively in a Bitcoin transaction, instead of having just one wallet input, you have multiple. So you would have wallet A, wallet B, wallet C are all inputs into a transaction. All of wallet A, B, C sign the transaction, and then funds go to wallets D, E, F on the other side. And from somebody observing the blockchain, obviously you see A, B, C contribute funds to the transaction, D, E, F get them out. But you cannot tell that wallet A intended to send the amount to which of D, E, F. There's like a privacy set. There's like a privacy set there, basically. And so, maybe if you see enough of the transactions, or if you do further kind of inspection around it, you can get some probability or likelihood that it went.
So you're looking at heuristics at that point, basically.
To
try and
but from the raw transaction, fundamentally on the blockchain, they get mixed together in the coin join operation and then sent out. And so there are some wallets that have been built that natively use this coin join functionality when you make a transaction to kind of try, like, give you privacy by design or privacy by default or whatever kind of thing. If you look at the Lazarus website, you'll see some of those. One of them's called Wasabi wallet, I think. But basically it's a wallet, but instead of interfacing, like the way it interfaces with a transaction is it uses coin join to mix your transaction with other transactions to make the transaction. So that's not the only way that you can design a mixer. There are other ways. One kind of like maybe kind of simple way is that somebody basically does that as a service. Like instead of me sending money directly to the wallet I intend to, I send it to this effectively centralized place. It also receives transactions from others and then sends them out. So that's another way to mix things. I think there's some services
into my mind there as well. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Oh, I'm going to say it now. But that's almost like it's a real life fence. That's like a pawn shop, basically a pawnbroker, effectively, because some of that stuff may be stolen and they've got all this stuff commingled with legitimate items that are being pawned off. But yeah, it will never cease to amaze me how we recreate digital analogs of the real world, so to speak, because our imagination is kind of limited to, okay, what are we doing here? Let's just do it online, and online gives you the velocity. That's basically the difference between the two in my mind. I may be slightly trite in that summary, but yeah, so that's kind of what a mixer does. Anyway, carry on. Yeah, so I don't want to break your train.
No, that's fine. The last kind of main category of things is using zero knowledge proofs to do this. So like zero knowledge proofs are starting to be littered like everywhere in crypto systems now, because they're a fundamentally useful concept, obviously.
Just one we've refused to do an episode on, and we keep promising you guys we're going to do one on, but
we did one on ZK login.
Yes, we did, but we didn't touch ZK proofs in there.
Because I'm not ready to attempt to explain them yet.
Mate, no, honestly, full disclosure, Michael and I have obviously been talking about blockchain about 2 years before we even started recording this podcast. And the first thing we tried to research was ZK proofs. We spent hours. I'm not going to lie to you. We spent hours on YouTube together. And we were like, got it? Nope. And then we just walked away. So one day we will get there. But I have a good authority that not many people get it anyway. So
yeah, well, okay. So the main, like, if you want to look at an example of how these are used to preserve privacy, I guess one of the examples is Tornado Cash. Which has been in the news recently as well, as you mentioned. So Tornado Cash is something that exists on Ethereum mostly. So CoinJoin we talked about. That's at least the examples I was talking about were Bitcoin blockchain, one. Now we're talking about Ethereum, so dealing with ETH.
So now we've got smart contracts involved.
So now you have smart contracts, and that's really what enables this, because like essentially what Tornado Cash is a smart contract that you send Ethereum to in kind of different predefined amounts, and along with sending the Ethereum, you send them a piece of data. It's called I think it's called a commitment. And then after some amount of time on the other end from another address, you can withdraw your Ethereum. And when you withdraw the Ethereum, you provide another data point, another like number, essentially called a nullifier. And then alongside that, you provide this thing called a zero knowledge proof, which is where like the magic is.
The magic box.
And it proves that you have the right to withdraw a certain amount of Ethereum without revealing the attribution of that Ethereum to what deposited it, to the address that deposited it. I think is kind of, I don't know if that's like entirely accurate.
It's a fair summary for now, but let's get just to zoom back out for our listeners. The whole point of this is you're trying to fracture the money, then move the money without people being able to tell where it came from.
Yes.
Fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's keep
and
going.
Those systems will also have basically liquidity constraints on them.
Of course,
or you might say like privacy liquidity constraints on them. Because if I move too much into them and then out of them, it kind of becomes more obvious what the link is. Yeah. So there's like, you might need to wait until enough volume has gone through the system that it is effectively, the attribution is broken, not just from a very narrow like technical sense, but also in like a heuristical sense.
Yeah.
Okay. That's mixers, I guess.
So that's mixers. So this cast of characters is bridges, which we've just done. Well, have we done bridges? Anyway,
no, we haven't talked about bridges too much yet.
Okay, cool. So let's
talk about mixers. We can talk about bridges.
We can talk about bridges now.
So the other thing that you would want to do if you're like, trying to maneuver this money through the system is move it to different chains, right? Because maybe what I got access to as the attacker was on Bitcoin. But I want to use systems on Ethereum to launder it. Yeah. Or I want to use systems on Ethereum to do DeFi on it that will, help me break the attribution.
Yeah. That's
or cash it out or whatever. So I might need to like move it between chains.
Yeah.
So I would use bridges to do that. Basically.
Yeah.
And in particular, Lazarus used one bridge in particular fairly heavily called Thorchain.
Is Thorchain considered okay? Go on. I'm going to let you.
I don't know. I'm going to say stuff that's wrong, probably.
No. It's not, I don't know if it's actually technically wrong. I think we're kind of splitting hairs, but that's what we do on this podcast.
You wouldn't call it a bridge?
I didn't. They did bridging things on it. They did bridging like activities, which is obviously just translation of one asset into another. But when I go on their website, they describe themselves as a decentralized liquidity protocol. So I don't think they see themselves, but then also is that a bit the way they've set up their liquidity pools, which you're going to go into in a sec, does lend itself to bridging? No. So are they kind of being a bit duplicitous in how they describe themselves against how they've actually set themselves up? I don't know. Let's go into Thorchain. Also, misnomer for our listeners, which is very annoying for me as well. They're not a chain. They're not a separate blockchain.
Well, there is a separate blockchain involved.
What? Oh, okay. Go on.
Ooh, it's a bit complicated. I'm probably going to get some of the details wrong.
Okay, no worries. Go ahead.
Should do their own research. But yeah, so Thorchain is like a decentralized ecosystem, almost decentralized system that allows you to swap assets, and those assets can be on different chains.
Yeah.
So you can use it to bridge from one chain to another, certainly. Yeah. When we thought about like Cetus, for example, and we looked at the way that swaps happened there, like asset swaps happened there. If you remember, the way those happened was you would have a pool of assets, and it was like a paired pool, right? So you would have like token A and token B, like SUI and USDC, and those would be paired in a pool. And then that was what I contributed liquidity to if I was a liquidity provider, and that was the liquidity that allowed me to exchange A for B, SUI for USDC or whatever.
Basically.
Thorchain is similar, but different. So on the way it works is instead of having these like paired pools of token A and token B all over the place and having like whatever the combinatorics of that would be across like a large number of assets, instead what they have is a pool. Every pool pairs an asset like BTC or well, I don't know, whatever, like let's say ETH or USDC, pairs it with this token called Rune.
Yeah. It's almost like a
Um,
reference pairing. So try and envision this in your mind. If you've not been onto a liquidity protocol, Cetus will have, I don't know, I'll put it in FX terms. Cetus will have CAD versus USD, and then it'll have USD versus GBP, and then it'll have GBP versus Euro, and so forth. There'll just be these different distinct pools of different distinct pairs. What Thorchain does that's different is every currency would be paired to a world reserve currency. In this case, imagine if it was USD, which is the world trade.
yeah.
So every currency has a USD pair, and then I
Yeah.
don't
So
know if
it
they
would
do
be
that
like,
with this.
maybe, I mean, this is almost never the case now, I guess, but maybe I can't exchange Canadian dollars for British pounds directly. Maybe my bank doesn't have that.
Yeah.
But what I can do is exchange my Canadian dollars for US dollars,
Yes.
and then exchange my US dollars for pounds.
For pounds via that reference token. And you know what?
Yeah.
That does exist today, and that does actually happen, and it's relevant to this story because it's part of the reason why Lazarus need their crypto money to exchange into or off ramp into US
Sure.
into a world currencies, because they actually have a closed loop currency. North Korea has been cut off from the financial institutions and cut off from SWIFT. So yeah, it does happen, Michael. So they do need to actually go via different currencies in real life as well when it comes to TradFi, traditional finance, and fiat currency. So yeah, we've just got the digital equivalent of what of North Korea's currency situation happening right now, except these people have set up this decentralized exchange and said, hey, we provide liquidity, but it's always against this reference token, which allows you to do, as I said earlier, and as Michael said earlier, bridging like activities, but they don't advertise themselves as a bridge. Not to me anyway. When I went on their website, I didn't come across that, but go on.
Yeah, I mean, I never really know what something intends to advertise itself as and why, because like, especially in the DeFi stuff, because it's so like abstract and heady and
they
whatever.
overload terms, and you think you understand this term from this context, and then you get to their website and they use it in a completely different context. You're like, well, so is this a thing, or is it a standardized thing, or not?
But
anyway,
so like, okay, so I would exchange, like, let's say I want to exchange something. I'm on Ethereum. I would send the token I have, like let's say Ethereum. I would send it to a address, a smart contract address that is controlled by Thorchain. And then what happens is there's a separate blockchain, which is the Thorchain L1, which would have like an oracle on it that is watching, or a set of oracles on it that's watching that address, and would say, this person just deposited Ethereum into the smart contract here. Then on that separate L1, that transaction would get processed. And then once it's processed, let's say I wanted to bridge to like some other blockchain, like, I don't know, whatever, Sui, just because it's in my mind because we're saying it. I don't know if they support Sui or not. Then once that transaction gets processed on the Thorchain L1, it would then send a message to the corresponding Thorchain smart contract or wallet address that is on that other blockchain to release the funds and send it to where the user intended to send it. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it's exactly like a bridge. It's a decentralized bridge. Sorry,
it's a decentralized protocol that allows you to swap assets between blockchains.
That is exactly like a bridge. Cool. Thank you for that explainer.
Yeah, hopefully it's correct. But anyway, the important thing here for what we're talking about is on the Thorchain blockchain, the Thorchain L1, there's a set of validators, right? Which make the network work. And so this is going to start sounding pretty parallel to what happened in Sui and Cetus.
Cetus, yeah.
Because that set of validators has control over what happens on the Thorchain in the Thorchain protocol. They can exercise control over what happens in the Thorchain protocol. And so when the ByBit attack happened and Lazarus started moving money through Thorchain, you can look at the Lazarus Bounty website. They moved ended up moving a lot of value through Thorchain. There was discussion in the Thorchain community about what they should do. And in fact, I think there was a very short amount of time, I think literally a few minutes, where some of the Thorchain developers, like kind of maintainers of the code of the protocol at least, thought that they should freeze the assets and took actions to freeze those assets. and then were kind of pretty immediately afterwards, overruled by the validators, and the assets were not frozen. So similar to in the Cetus attack, the Sui community validators decided we can coordinate to freeze these assets.
Yeah.
Right. There was almost, from my external perspective, almost a parallel discussion that happened in the ByBit attack on Thorchain among the set of validators to decide what to do, and they decided the opposite. They decided not to freeze the assets. They decided that they are intended to be a neutral, censorship resistant rail. That's maybe censorship resistant might be a bit strong depending on how you define that term, but they're intended to be a neutral rail, and so they did decide not to process the transactions. My understanding is when they could have decided otherwise, similar to that, they could have coordinated to not process.
Okay, we're getting pressed for time, but that begs the question, Michael. Thoughts? What do you think on the completely different outcomes between the two different communities?
What? I don't know. I'm it's interesting, right? Because I see them as fairly parallel cases.
Yeah, completely.
Of a community deciding to take different responses.
Completely different responses.
And I think a lot of the Thorchain conversation, from what I was kind of able to post hoc look at it from the articles and stuff, was that it was based on that ethos of, this is a decentralized system that just does the thing. If it starts making judgments about what it does and doesn't do, it becomes not a decentralized system anymore. It effectively becomes a more centralized system that has different responsibilities.
No, it doesn't. It just becomes opinionated because the community did have a choice actually, and they were able to overrule, so they could just choose.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the other part of it, right? If the choice was in front of them, what extent is it? Yeah, that does say something about the extent to which it is and isn't decentralized.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess, because it's dependent on how difficult it is to coordinate action, I guess. So that does talk about the whole decentralized centralization spectrum that we always come back to. But also, I mean, brass tacks, you love living in that world between what people think is real and what the reality is on the ground. The reality is on the ground. If you're caught money laundering, you're going to get the attention of the authorities, and your existence, your philosophical question about decentralized, how we want to be, how neutral we want to be, goes up in smoke, and you've just now got people with affidavits against their name. So I do wonder, there's the reality on the ground, and there's the philosophical objectives that you're trying to achieve, and how much are you willing to sacrifice just to achieve such a set objective, I think is interesting. I mean, as we said at the end of the Cetus podcast, I think it's episode 22, where we discussed how they reacted to freezing it. Obviously, they opened themselves up to the that exact same accusation. You guys are too centralized. How were you able to do this? Everyone's like, oh, it's not really decentralized. It's at the end of the day, they want to be able to be around. They want to be friends to institutions, because we have all these traditional finance institutions and they want to onboard them. So I can understand why they want to be taken seriously. If you're going to, I mean, I don't want to be like the Tornado Cash guy and end up in court. That's a real possibility at the end of the day if the authorities really take a disliking to what you're doing. I think it's interesting that they made that decision. I think we could discuss that for hours, but I'm conscious of time and listeners' attention spans, and this has been a very technically detailed episode. So let's go on to the conclusion then. So yeah, so they decided they're going to be neutral and they let the funds flow.
Yep. That's my understanding. Yeah. And if you look at again at the Lazarus Bounty website, you can see the amounts that went through and kind of what what ByBit's judgment was about which ones cooperated, didn't cooperate, froze funds, didn't freeze funds, that kind of thing, which is interesting. I think another interesting aspect of this is how much did they actually get out? I don't know that anybody can say what the actual value of what was extracted was. How much is still just sitting there in various wallets.
That was interesting to go onto the website today at the time of recording and realize actually there's a hefty amount that hasn't left the ecosystem.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, I don't know exactly how updated the data is at this point in time compared to, in the immediate aftermath when they were pretty heavy on recovery. It's possible that there's drift in the data. It's not
of course,
clearly real time or anything like that.
I can't imagine
It
you'd
does
have
seem
to.
like it's not uncommon after these breaches happen for a lot of value to remain in
Hmm.
wallets in different places.
Yeah, I just saw a headline
And you wonder
today.
why. Is that
Yeah.
like they're awaiting a plan? They're
Yes.
waiting for like heat to die down.
100%. I
They're
think that.
yeah.
I think that. I will say that with unqualified opinion. There was a wallet today from a hack that was 3 years ago that just went live and moved almost a billion. So number one, I think obviously you're waiting for asset appreciation, and then it gets so big where you're
Sure,
like,
yeah.
I've got to shift this because more eyes are going to come onto this. I've got to do something. So you're in a weird, stuck in between a rock and a hard place type situation. So you've got the asset appreciation, then you've got the attention that it will have, but also you've got to plan. Just quite simply, you've got to plan every single step. If you're going to off ramp it, that adds difficulty. If you don't want to obfuscate it, but you do just want to, you don't want to off ramp it, but you do just want to obfuscate its origins, that adds another step, which actually neatly brings me on to my point, and I think I'll make it the final point of the podcast. Not even a point, an observation is, I don't know if you've been aware, Michael, been checking on the news, but stable coins are having a moment right now. So far as someone said, this is the chat GPT moment for crypto in terms of their adoption for financial institutions. For those who don't know, stablecoin is USDC. It's basically a digital asset that is backed 100% supposedly by a US
Mm-hmm.
Treasury dollar bill as well. So basically, you buy a USDC, it's worth $1. It will always be $1 regardless of where the market is, because at the end of the day, it's backed by a dollar bill, a Treasury bill. Companies have now realized this is a very cheap way. Large multinationals is a very cheaper way. It is a cheaper way of moving money between different countries rather than having to convert currency. If you just got this one stable coin, you issue your own stable coin in some instances, and then you can just move your balances between different countries and so forth. It's obviously everyone's looking 3 years out into the future and being like, oh, a lot of these companies are issuing stable coins. It's only a matter of time before they start saying, okay, we will just take payments from our consumers in stable coins, or we can business to business transactions are now starting to look very attractive and people are paying stable coins. So now this hit me when I was thinking of Lazarus off ramping as well. I was like, well, there's going to come a point where they don't need to off ramp into hard currency to pay
Yep.
whoever they need to pay for
As
whatever.
stable coins become more useful, yeah, then you need the stable. You
They're just going
just
to
need the stable
basically,
coin or something that will kind of transfer it to a stable coin on the back end.
you've got the
Yeah.
borderlessness. And so I think OFAC and sanctions are going to get even more important than they already are in crypto right now. One thing we haven't spent too much time on, which really is kind of self-explanatory, is why, but also because it's kind of hard. It's a bit of a murky world. Is you do have centralized exchanges that have lax KYC rules because of where they're based.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know them because we haven't gone on dark web and googled them, and quite frankly don't want that digital trail, because I don't want to trigger anyone's suspicions, especially where I live. But yeah, so again, off ramping becomes less of an imperative when you can say, okay, we've got this world reserve currency stablecoin, USDC, USDT, and so forth. Maybe I can just pay you in a stablecoin. And I do know, for example, I have been shopping where I live, and they say, do you have USDT? We can just take it from there as well because we have lower interchange fees. The interchange fees disappear. Interchange fees are what credit card companies or card networks charge
Mm-hmm.
merchants, and yeah, that's a whole different thing for a whole other day, another whole topic. Michael and I have started slowly discussing on and off. But yeah, all in all, that's basically what we can summarize as is stealing a lot of money in real life or digitally creates problems. You've got to move that money. You've got to hide its origins if you want to use it at some point with the legal system, because at some point the legal system is designed intentionally with choke points, because none of these are new problems. And you have that same problem with digital as well, even if you're acting on behalf of a nation state, because that nation state, such as North Korea, as I said earlier, is a closed loop system with its currency. So if you are a nefarious mercenary who's selling them something or doing some activity on their behalf, you don't want to be paid in North Korean, I can't remember, I think it's won, I'm not sure. You don't want to be paid in North Korean currency. You want to be paid in something you can actually use when you leave the country or when you go about your daily life. So that's where obfuscating and then laundering money comes into it, and then being eventually able to off ramp and give it to that person or that service. So yeah, watch this space, because as you can see on the Lazarus Bounty, I think even looking at time of recording, it says 1.2 billion has gone dark, which means they can't trace it. 73 million has been frozen, and another 78 million remains traceable. So, I mean, there's a quote going around with traditional finance that money laundering, resources we dedicate to stop stolen funds being used in the legal system, I think only 1% of it, or less than 1% as a quote, even though it's open to interpretation depending on whose data you use, actually gets stopped, which basically means money laundering is borderline 5 nines as a reliable process in terms of being able to wash your stolen assets and use them legally as though they're legally obtained. Thank you for listening. We ran on a bit long. Michael, any final thoughts?
That's it for me.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And we'll catch you on the next episode.